Have you ever noticed that folks, when they're in a group, tend to act differently than they would if they were by themselves? All right, it's like, gosh, you don't act like that when you're by yourself. You change when you're in a group. Part of that is social influence, and it's a very interesting branch of psychology. In fact, there's a whole course in it. But basically, what you have happening is people are affected by the people around them. And they may do things that they might not ordinarily do. I mean, look at mobs, for instance. You know, that whole mob mentality. When folks are in a crowd, it tends to draw more of a crowd. Granted, there haven't been many crowds lately, but if you think back a few weeks or a couple of months, there were. So this whole social influence unit really is based on the idea that individuals may behave a certain way by themselves, but in a very different way when they're in groups. If you look at the Stanford Prison Experiment, which is required of you to watch, you see that in action. Why would ordinary folks, when they're in a group, show more control over the prisoners? These were average everyday folks, everyday college folks. And individually they were great, but you put them in an environment, a hostile environment, and it was amazing just how quickly their behavior changed, and that the prisoners themselves became more compliant. All right, they actually believed in that particular experiment that these wardens and that these prison guards really were in charge, and they felt victimized. They actually began to believe that indeed they had done something wrong. And again, that's part of the whole group thing that I was talking about, and I do want you to watch that video because it'll shed more light on it. Now, it also shows conformity. That part of what the video shows is how easy it is to turn into somebody you're not. How easy it is to abandon your own beliefs and morals when you are with other people. You might remember that even in middle school or high school when there were cliques, okay, that you may have been very nice when you were by yourself. You might have been very decent, but the moment you got in with those bad folks or those folks who were up to no good, you became like them, even if you hit yourself at the end of the day for it. That is what conformity does. And when we're talking about social conformity, we're talking about conforming to fit in. Pretty much nothing else. You conform, you change who you are, you change your beliefs, you change your morals. You sell yourself out, basically, for the sake of the group you're in. So when we think of conforming socially, we're talking about doing it for popularity, we're talking about doing it to be part of something, regardless of maybe what the values are of that particular group. Now, there's also something called informational conformity, and with that, you change, but not because you want to fit in. You change because you have to change, because the job requires you to change in a certain way, to wear a certain outfit, or to smile, or you get information about an election coming up, and you read something, and it then verifies in terms of what your opinion is. That's informational, and that's totally different. Now, compliance. When you comply, you're giving in to somebody's request. Okay, you're saying, okay, I will do it for you. Well, what makes us comply? There are 6 principles. And the first of these is authority. That authority will make us comply because somebody in a position of power, or perceived power even, may oftentimes get what they want from us because they're in a position where they can. You look at law enforcement, politicians, teachers, so forth and so on. In a sense, because of the position that's held, all right, we have an idea that we have to comply with what they say. Then you have likability, and that's when we tend to give in to somebody because we like them. All right, for whatever reason, we like them enough that we're willing to do what they ask of us. I mean, they wear that shield of charisma and decency, and so we feel like, okay, well, they're a good person, they're a nice person, so I want to make them happy, therefore I'm going to comply with their wishes. Then we have social proof, and with that, it's a strength in numbers thing. 5 people are doing something, 5 people cross the street against the light, Folks may follow that, even though they know they shouldn't. It's against the law. They'll do it anyway because of strength in numbers. You have 4 or 5 people that are doing it, so it must be okay, and I'm not going to get in trouble. I hold my horses on that. I sure the heck wouldn't bet on that one, because you just never know when that cop's going to come around the corner. All right. Then we have reciprocity, and that's when you give in. And you give into a task because you want that person to, if you ever ask anything of them, they'll feel kind of obligated. So it's like, I scratch your back, you scratch my back. I help you out with this, then later you'll help me out with that. So it's kind of a, an even deal there. Then we have the scarcity, the law of scarcity. And that's the idea that humans do not like to be left out. They don't like to be left out of anything. They've got to know what's going on, and they've got to get some of whatever it is. And we saw that recently, with the whole toilet paper fiasco that occurred at the beginning of this pandemic. Actually, it occurred a little bit before the pandemic started. Well, what happens is the fear of losing out, the fear that there'll be nothing left, makes folks kind of panic, in a sense, and they have to get their hands on whatever it is. I mean, it's a big part of sales when you think about it. I mean, the whole, 24-hour sale or Black Friday, whatever it is, going out of business. When you're afraid that you're not going to get your hands on something, okay, you kind of go out of your way, and you will push your way through to get what it is you want. And the last one is commitment. And that's the idea that when you invest in something a little bit, it's harder to break away. Meaning you've made a commitment, like in school, okay? I mean, you made a commitment to this class, which is why usually folks do not walk away at the end of the term. They might at the beginning because it's not their cup of tea, or they couldn't handle the whole online thing. But by the time you reach week 8 or 9, okay, you feel a sense of commitment to it, so you stick through, okay? And this applies to a lot of things, whatever it is that you're invested in. So that is the law of commitment, and all 6 of those basically are part of compliance. Now, the very last thing I want to mention, because this is kind of a shorter chapter, is bystander apathy. When you think about it, we are kind of group oriented, and we tend to want to be with the dominant group. We tend to stay with the pack. We don't break away because we don't want to be looked at as an outsider. So we stay within the pack, and we follow the pack rules. And most of the time that might be okay, but think about it in a situation where somebody may be hurt or suffering, and you walk by in a busy city. Well, a lot of folks will pass the buck. They'll assume that somebody else is going to do it. And part of the reason of that is bystander apathy. You figure, with all these people, okay, why should I be the one to stand out from the crowd when nobody else is helping? So we tend to stay with the group. We tend to stay with the majority group. And since the person who's needing help is all by themselves and there's nobody else around them, we're kind of afraid of standing out. We kind of feel like the spotlight is on us, which is a little bit irrational, but it kind of explains a little bit why we tend to stay and do what everybody else does. That's the key. We do what everybody else does. It's very hard, in a sense, to break the rules of the group that you're in. So that's it. Social influence. It's interesting, but it's also a little light on material. We'll talk more about it when we meet in class. Okay? Take care.